Have you ever stopped to help a stranger, not knowing that moment might change your life forever? This is the story of a rugged single dad who found a simple girl lying near the forest edge, barely conscious, bitten by a snake. He didn't know her name, where she came from, or why she was out there alone. All he knew was that she needed help, and so he helped. But just hours later, as a helicopter descended through the twilight and a team of private security agents rushed to her side, he realized this wasn't just any girl. This was a woman with a secret powerful enough to rewrite both their destinies. What started as an act of kindness turned into something much more, a journey of healing, trust, and a love that neither of them saw coming. Before we begin, if you enjoy heartwarming stories about unexpected encounters, second chances, and the quiet magic of true love, make sure to subscribe to our channel. It's free, and it helps us keep sharing stories that move the heart and feed the soul. Now sit back, take a deep breath, and let's begin. The sun was beginning to droop behind the distant pines, casting long golden streaks across the Wyoming sky. Cal Bennett tightened the worn canvas strap of his backpack and glanced down at his daughter. Little Lily, all of 6 years old, wore her mother's old flannel shirt as a makeshift dress. It hung loosely on her small frame, but it kept her warm. Her tiny hands were busy gathering wild blueberries into a tin pail, the sound of each berry dropping a soft metallic rhythm as they moved deeper into the forest. "Don't go too far ahead, sweetheart," Cal called gently, stepping over a fallen log. "I won't, Daddy," Lily replied, her voice bright and confident in the quiet woods. It was their Sunday tradition, a walk through the forest behind their modest cabin. They didn't need much, Cal always said, just air that smelled like pine, a working truck, and each other. Cal wasn't always a man of simple things. Years ago, he'd worn crisp white shirts, sat in meetings about wind resistance and fuselage designs. But that life died the day Laura, his wife, did. Gone in an instant when a drunk driver took the wrong turn. Since then, the forest had become a refuge, a place where grief echoed softly but didn't scream. They were turning back toward the trail when he heard it, a sound not natural to the woods, a faint, broken moan. Cal froze. His instincts kicked in faster than thought. "Lily," he said quietly, crouching beside her, "stay here, behind this tree. I'll be right back." She nodded without a word, sensing his change in tone. The sound came again, more urgent this time. Cal moved quickly, his boots soft over pine needles, until he spotted a flash of denim near the underbrush. At first it looked like someone had just fallen asleep there. A young woman curled on her side, as if she were napping in the leaves. But her skin was pale, almost gray. Her breath came in shallow pants. One leg was bent unnaturally, and her foot was swollen, the skin around it taut and angry with color. Cal knelt beside her and pulled off his flannel overshirt. "Hey! Hey, can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open, soft brown eyes, confused, terrified. "Snake," she whispered. Okay, you're going to be all right," Cal said, wrapping the shirt around her lower leg in a makeshift compression. "We've got to move fast." She tried to sit up, failed. "No," Cal said firmly. "Don't move. I've got you." He glanced back toward the trail, then scooped her up in his arms. She was surprisingly light. She smelled faintly of cedar and something else, maybe jasmine. Lily was standing where he'd left her, clutching the blueberry pail. "Is she okay?" she asked, eyes wide. "She's hurt. We're going to help her." Back at the cabin, Cal laid the woman gently on the worn couch. Lily brought wet towels and a flashlight. Cal kept pressure on the wound, checked for signs of venom spreading. His hands were steady. They always were in emergencies. It was the quiet afterward he dreaded. The woman's skin was burning with fever. "Emily," she murmured, barely audible. "My name's Emily." Cal soaked a rag in cold water and pressed it to her forehead. "All right, Emily. You just hang on." He grabbed his old landline and dialed the emergency number. Static. He tried again. Still nothing. The storm clouds had rolled in fast. No bars, no satellite signal, and the town clinic was 30 miles out, on a gravel road already slick with rain. He sat beside her, watching her chest rise and fall like a fragile bird in a storm. "Who do you think she is, Daddy?" Lily asked, kneeling beside the couch. I don't know, Lil, he replied, brushing damp hair from Emily's forehead. But I know we were meant to find her. Outside, thunder cracked across the sky like the world itself was trying to tear open. Cal looked at the clock. She needed real medical help, and fast. Then came the sound. A low, deep thrum. Rhythmic. Not thunder. Not wind. He stood and stepped to the window. His heart stopped. Out beyond the field, where the tree line met their backyard, a helicopter was descending. Sleek, matte black, like something out of a movie. Its rotors sent the grass and branches whipping. Rain had barely started, but the wind from the blades sprayed it sideways. Lily clutched his hand. Daddy! 3 men in dark suits stepped out the moment the skids touched down. One wore an earpiece. Another had a briefcase. The third looked straight at Cal through the cabin window. Then came the words that would rewrite everything Cal thought he knew about the world. We're here for Miss Langford. Please step aside. Miss Langford? Cal turned toward the girl still trembling on his couch. Emily Langford. He'd read that name once, maybe twice, in news articles he never finished. Something about a tech empire, a mysterious heiress who never gave interviews. And now she was lying in his home, wrapped in his flannel shirt, her secrets bleeding into the wood floors of a life she didn't belong to. But for reasons he couldn't explain, he wasn't ready to let her go. The men didn't wait for permission. They moved with quiet urgency, their polished boots thudding against the wood porch like the knocking of some greater fate. Cal stepped in front of the door instinctively, his body blocking the threshold. The man in the lead, tall with steel gray eyes and a jaw too sharp to ever smile, lifted his hand. Not in threat, but in formality. We're not here to harm anyone, he said in a clipped tone. We were dispatched for Miss Langford's safety. Behind him, the helicopter blades continued to slice through the rain-dark air, whipping Cal's flannel shirt against his chest. I don't care who you are, Cal replied evenly, voice like gravel in a river. She's not going anywhere until she's stable. She's stable enough, the man said, stepping forward. But Cal didn't budge. From inside the cabin, a voice, soft and broken, called out, It's all right. Cal turned. Emily was trying to sit up on the couch, pale as frost, her eyes glossy but awake. They're with me, she said, her voice no louder than the patter of rain on the tin roof. It took a few seconds for Cal to move aside, not out of fear, but because something about the moment felt like a chapter closing before it had even begun. The agents entered. One produced a medical scanner from the briefcase and began taking vitals with cold precision. Another placed a satellite phone call, speaking in hushed terms about blood pressure stabilizing and extraction successful. Lily stood at the far end of the kitchen, holding her stuffed bunny tight, eyes wide. Emily's gaze met hers. Hi, she said softly, her lips lifting in a weary smile. Lily blinked, then smiled back, like children do when they sense no danger, only kindness. Is she really a princess or something? She asked Cal in a whisper. Cal exhaled. Something like that, baby. Within minutes, the agents had prepped Emily for departure. She looked at Cal as they brought in a collapsible stretcher, something between apology and regret in her expression. I didn't mean to cause this, she murmured. I just needed to disappear. For a while. You almost disappeared for good, Cal replied, his voice low. You should have told someone. Anyone. I couldn't, not anymore. Her eyes flickered with something heavier than fear. You don't know what it's like being watched all your life, and still feeling completely invisible. He wanted to ask more, but there wasn't time. One agent tapped his watch. Emily reached out, touching Cal's wrist gently. You didn't have to stop, but you did. Cal looked down at her hand. Elegant, calloused in a way that didn't match her wealth. She had been hiking alone, that much was clear. No makeup, no designer gear. Just a simple girl, bitten by a snake and saved by a man who had nothing left to give, except kindness. Get some rest, he said, clearing his throat. Emily hesitated. Then with a subtle shift in tone, she added, I meant what I said. Thank you. For not asking who I was. For treating me like a person. Then she was gone. The cabin door swung shut. The rotors kicked up again, louder this time, scattering loose pine needles across the porch. Cal stepped outside with Lily in his arms, watching the helicopter lift into the storm-gray sky. Its lights flickered, then disappeared beyond the pines. Gone, like smoke through a chimney. Back inside, the silence hit harder than before. Cal sat down at the kitchen table, rubbing his temples. "Well," he muttered, "that was something." Lily, ever perceptive, crawled into his lap. "She didn't look like a billionaire." He chuckled. "What's a billionaire supposed to look like?" "Not like someone who likes pancakes and cats," Lily said matter-of-factly. Cal laughed. "Fair enough." But the truth settled in quietly after that. He'd expected a storm, a crisis, a rush of adrenaline. What he hadn't expected was the emptiness that followed, the kind that creeps into quiet places and makes itself at home. He glanced at the couch, the faint imprint of where she had lain still visible in the worn cushion. Her presence lingered like perfume, not fancy or expensive, but human, real. The next morning he tried to return to routine, fixing a carburetor, feeding the chickens, packing Lily's school lunch. But the hum of the forest felt different, like it knew something had changed. 3 days later, a package arrived. There was no return address, just a handwritten label, Cal Bennett. Inside, a leather-bound book of rare aircraft schematics, the kind collectors drooled over. Tucked inside was a simple note, penned in neat cursive, "For the man who saved more than a life. Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. E." Cal turned the card over. Nothing more. No number. No forwarding address. Just a signature that felt like a closing. Or maybe the beginning of something neither of them could name yet. The forest had never felt so still. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath in the days after Emily Langford vanished into the sky. Cal Bennett stood at the edge of the porch, coffee mug in hand, watching the mist curl above the tree line like something alive. In the distance, the faint sound of a woodpecker tapped rhythmically, like a heartbeat echoing across a hollow chest. He sipped the coffee, though it had gone cold, and replayed the last words she'd said before they carried her off. "Thank you, for treating me like a person. It should have been enough." But it wasn't. Cal didn't consider himself a romantic. Laura used to tease him about it, said he was too practical, too quiet to be poetic. But even she admitted he felt things deeply. He just didn't always know how to say them. Now in the stillness, he felt something again. Not regret, not longing, just an awareness that the world was larger and more complicated than he'd let himself believe since the accident. And that a girl like Emily, no, a woman like Emily, could walk into his life, shatter his expectations, and leave behind a silence more profound than grief. Lily broke that silence as only a child could. She burst out the front door in her muddy boots, arms flailing, her braids bouncing. "Daddy, I finished it!" Cal turned, blinking. She held out a piece of lined paper, the kind he'd tucked into her school bag every morning. On it was a crayon drawing of the cabin, the forest, and 3 stick figures. One was labeled me, one you, and the third, Miss Emily. His throat tightened. "I made a wish," Lily said proudly. "I wrote it on the back." Cal flipped the paper. In jagged 6-year-old letters, she'd written, "I hope Miss Emily comes back to see us again, and we can eat pancakes and fix cars." Cal laughed under his breath, holding the paper to his chest. "That's a good wish, baby." "Do you think she got my drawing?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, I think she got something better." That night, rain returned, as if Wyoming itself couldn't decide whether to let the season go. Cal tucked Lily into bed, read her a chapter from Charlotte's Web, then lingered longer than usual after turning off the lamp. He sat in the kitchen afterward, the old house ticking around him like it always did. Water heater popping, boards groaning with memory. Then came the knock. He blinked. Not the wind, not a branch. A knock. Cal opened the door slowly. There was no one there, only a box. Small cardboard, no label. He brought it inside, cut the tape with his pocket knife, and opened the lid. Inside was an envelope and a jar, a mason jar filled with golden honey. Attached to the jar was a tag, Black Hills Reserve, 100% organic, family made. The letter was brief. Cal, this honey comes from my mother's beekeepers. I don't usually send it to anyone, but I remembered what you said about pancakes needing something real. Thank you again. You reminded me what that means. E. He stared at the jar for a long time. The next morning he made pancakes. Lily giggled as the syrup trickled in golden spirals. This tastes like a rainbow. Cal smiled, but his thoughts drifted. Emily. What kind of life did she return to? Marble floors, bodyguards, scheduled interviews? Did she think about that night in the woods the way he did? Not as a rescue, but as a meeting between two people who no longer knew how to belong? Later that day, he drove into town, not for groceries, just to get out of his own head. The road was still muddy from the rain, the trees dripping like they were mourning something unseen. At the post office, Mrs. Ramsey handed him a padded envelope. This came for you. Special courier. Another package. Inside, a book. Wings of the Mind. The Art of Personal Aviation. First edition. And another note, handwritten. You mentioned you used to love aircraft design. Thought this might bring back the good parts. P.S. Lily's drawing is on my fridge. Cal stared at the handwriting. Neat, clear, with just a hint of curves. Not the cursive of someone raised in boardrooms. This was personal. He sat in his truck for a long while, engine off, windshield flecked with raindrops. A quiet thought settled in. She hadn't forgotten. That night, Cal lay awake longer than usual. He stared at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above him, each blade casting a fleeting shadow in the moonlight. He thought about how people come into your life. Some crash in like wildfires. Others slip in quietly, like morning fog. Emily Langford had done both. She arrived unconscious, bitten by a snake, and left a wake of questions, possibility, and light. He didn't know what she wanted from him. Maybe nothing. Maybe just a memory of a simpler time in a life too crowded with expectations. But maybe she wanted to be remembered for more than her last name. And if that was true, Cal thought, then maybe she'd be back. 3 weeks passed. Cal had returned to his rhythm, if one could call it that. Mornings spent in the garage, evenings helping Lily with math homework, and weekends wandering the woods that once gave him solace. But now even the forest felt different. He hadn't heard from Emily again, not directly at least. No more notes, no packages, just silence. Clean, clinical, distant. He told himself that was how things were meant to be. People like her didn't linger in lives like his. She belonged to skyscrapers, not smoke-stained kitchens and creaky floorboards. Still, every time he passed the spot where she'd collapsed among the ferns, something in him paused. Maybe that's all it was, he told himself one night, drying dishes while Lily brushed her teeth. A moment. But some moments don't fade, they ferment. It was Saturday morning when everything shifted again. The sound of an engine rumbled down the gravel path leading to their cabin. Slow, deliberate, unfamiliar. Cal stepped out onto the porch, wiping his hands on a rag, squinting through the haze of early sun. A silver SUV rolled to a stop beneath the old oak. Out stepped a woman in jeans, a simple blue sweater, and hiking boots still dusted with red earth. Cal's breath caught before his mind caught up. Emily. No helicopter. No suits. No fanfare. Just Emily. She looked different, healthier, sun-kissed. Her hair was tied in a loose braid over one shoulder. She carried a bag that looked like it had been slung over one too many fence posts. Cal leaned on the railing, trying to ignore how his heartbeat had picked up. Morning, she said, smiling shyly. You always just show up out of nowhere? Only when I owe someone pancakes. He blinked, then laughed. It was a good sound. Surprised, rough, real. Lily burst through the front door a beat later, then froze. Miss Emily! Emily barely had time to kneel before the little girl flung herself into her arms. I missed you, Lily declared, wrapping her arms around her neck. I missed you too, Emily whispered, squeezing back just as tightly. Cal watched them for a moment, that strange stillness in his chest melting like frost in sunlight. You here to stay? He asked, not because he needed an answer, but because he didn't trust himself to assume. Emily looked up at him. For the weekend, if you'll have me, he nodded. You hungry? I've been dreaming of Bennett pancakes for weeks. Inside, the kitchen filled with the hum of old routines. Cal cracked eggs, Emily chopped fruit, and Lily set the table with the careful urgency only children carry. I like your sweater, Lily said, eyeing the soft wool. Emily grinned. Thanks, it's not designer. I bought it at a roadside shop near Casper. The lady gave me a discount because I helped her unload a bread truck. Cal arched an eyebrow. Helping bread trucks now, are we? I'm trying this new thing, she said, mock serious. It's called normal human interaction. He smirked. Dangerous game. As they ate, the conversation turned casual. Weather, school, the cat that kept trying to adopt them. But under the surface, Cal felt the pulse of something unsaid. A shared understanding neither of them had voiced. A question neither dared ask. After breakfast, Lily dragged Emily outside to show her the tire swing Cal had finally fixed. He stayed back to clean, moving slowly, savoring the laughter echoing through the trees. She didn't have to come back, he thought. She chose to. That afternoon, they walked down to the stream behind the cabin. Emily took her boots off, waded in the icy water like a child, and tilted her head to the sun. This place, she said, eyes closed, feels like the world's volume is turned down. Cal skipped a rock. That's why I never left. She glanced at him. Do you ever miss it? The city, the buzz, the challenge. He shrugged. I used to think I'd build planes that touch the edge of space. Now I'm proud if I can keep a pickup from leaking oil for a month. But you chose this. I chose Lily, he said, his voice soft but certain. The rest just came with it. Emily nodded slowly. I didn't choose my life. It was chosen for me. Inheritance, expectations, cameras, decisions made before I even understood what they meant. He looked at her then, really looked. Beyond the name, the mystery, the headlines. She wasn't lost. She was looking. And for the first time in years, Cal realized so was he. That night, they sat around the fire pit behind the cabin. Lily had fallen asleep under a quilt, curled beside the dog that had wandered into their lives the year before. Emily wrapped her hands around a mug of cocoa. Can I tell you something stupid? She asked. Try me. I forgot what stars look like. He smiled. They never left. She turned toward him, eyes reflecting the flames. I don't want to go back yet, she said. Not because I'm afraid, but because this feels like the first real breath I've taken in years. Cal nodded, the weight of the night pressing gently between them. You're welcome here, he said. Always. And in the stillness, with only the crackle of fire between them, something passed. Not a promise, but the beginning of one. The next morning broke soft and golden, sunlight spilling over the valley like honey. Emily stood barefoot on the porch, wrapped in one of Cal's old flannel shirts, watching the steam rise from her coffee. She looked like she belonged there, not as a guest, but as something more rooted. Inside, Cal moved quietly through the kitchen. He didn't say much, but his eyes followed her in that quiet, steady way that meant more than words. Lily had gone to spend the morning with the Hendersons down the road, a play date Cal had scheduled earlier in the week, long before he knew Emily would be back. He hadn't thought about canceling it. Maybe part of him knew they needed this time. Alone. Emily sipped her coffee slowly, then turned to him with a crooked smile. So, what do normal people do on Sundays around here? He chuckled. Laundry, patch the roof, fix the fence that the elk knocked over. That all sounds thrilling, she said, eyes twinkling. You asked. I did. They fell into step like dancers who had practiced this for years. By noon, Emily had mud on her jeans and a splinter in her thumb from helping reinforce the porch railing. Cal watched as she cursed under her breath, attempting to pull it out with tweezers. Hold still, he said, kneeling before her. He took her hand, steadying it with one of his own, and gently worked the splinter free. There, he said. She looked at him, really looked, and her voice was quieter when she spoke again. You're a good man, Cal. He shrugged. Just doing what needs doing. No, you're more than that. She held his gaze. You didn't even hesitate. That night, in the woods. You didn't know who I was and you helped me anyway. Seemed like the right thing. A lot of people would have walked by. Then I'm glad I'm not a lot of people. Her eyes glistened. For a moment, she looked as if she might cry, but she blinked it back and smiled instead. Later that afternoon, they sat beneath the big oak behind the cabin. A breeze rustled the branches overhead, and birds called out from the distance. Emily rested her head against the tree trunk. Do you ever wonder what your life would have looked like if none of it happened? Cal didn't have to ask what she meant. My wife? He asked quietly. All the time. She nodded. You talk about her like she's still here. She is. In Lily. In this place. In me. He picked up a small twig and turned it between his fingers. But I stopped living there. In the what-ifs. It took a while. Emily hugged her knees, her face thoughtful. I was engaged once, she said after a long pause. Cal looked over. He was safe, charming, said all the right things, but somewhere along the line, I realized he didn't love me. He loved the idea of me, what I represented. And what do you represent? Cal asked. She smiled sadly. Control, power, a bank vault with legs. He didn't laugh. He didn't need to. I called it off, she continued. My father threatened to cut me out of the trust. My board panicked. Lawyers circled like sharks. But you walked anyway, she nodded. First good decision I made in years. They sat in silence after that. Not the awkward kind, but the kind that settles in like a soft blanket. Finally, Cal spoke. You're not just some billionaire heiress. She tilted her head. No, you're a woman who showed up in the middle of nowhere with nothing but a backpack and a scraped-up soul, and you didn't give up. That counts for more than any trust fund ever will. Her smile trembled at the edges. You see too much. I see just enough. As the sun dipped lower, Cal lit a small fire pit, and they roasted marshmallows like a pair of teenagers playing house. I haven't done this since I was a kid, Emily said, trying not to set hers on fire. You're burning it. It's caramelized. That's not caramelized. That's cremated. She laughed, loud and real, and he found himself grinning just to hear it. Then as the flames flickered, her tone shifted. I don't know what's next for me, she said. I have obligations, a company, people depending on me. But I keep thinking about this place, about you, about Lily. Cal looked into the fire, unsure what to say. Emily continued, her voice barely a whisper. I want to come back, not just to visit, but to belong. He turned to her. You already do. She met his eyes, and for a moment, it felt like the world had stopped spinning, just long enough for something real to take root. By Monday morning, Emily was still there. It wasn't spoken aloud. No agreement, no promise. She simply hadn't packed. Her bag stayed by the wall, untouched, and Cal didn't ask when she was leaving. Some silences are too full to disturb. The day started with sunlight on dewy grass and the smell of bacon curling through the kitchen. Cal moved around the stove while Emily sliced strawberries at the counter. They worked in a rhythm that surprised them both, like two musicians who had never practiced but somehow found the same beat. Lily padded in, still wearing her sleep shirt and mismatched socks. She climbed onto a stool and watched them with quiet amusement. You two look like you've been doing this forever, she said through a yawn. Cal raised an eyebrow. Doing what? Making breakfast, laughing, not burning things. Emily smirked. That's because I've been practicing my marshmallow skills. Lily giggled. You're much better at pancakes than marshmallows. Noted. Breakfast stretched long into the morning. Cal let the garage stay closed just this once. The world could wait a few more hours. After the dishes were washed and the table wiped down, Emily asked if she could join them on their errands. Cal hesitated, but Lily answered for him. She has to come, she insisted. She promised to help me pick out piano books. And just like that, it was decided. They drove into town with the windows down, the truck's old engine humming like an old dog purring in its sleep. Cal pointed out landmarks as they passed. The field where the 4th of July picnic happened every year, the bait shop that served surprisingly good chili, the bookstore with a cat named Socrates. Emily leaned forward, curious about everything. You really know everyone here, she said. It's a small town. But still, you remember their names, their dogs' names. Cal shrugged. Folks matter more out here. You take care of them, and they take care of you. She looked out the window, quiet for a moment. That sounds safe, It is, and boring, according to some. She turned to him. It sounds like exactly what I needed. At the music store, Emily helped Lily pick out 3 beginner books. One had illustrations of dancing squirrels. The second featured classic American folk songs. The third, Lily chose entirely because it had glitter on the cover. She's got a good eye for flair, Emily said, handing the books to the cashier. I wonder where she gets it, Cal replied, subtly teasing. Emily rolled her eyes. Trust me, I wasn't always this boring. Cal smiled but didn't press. He liked this version of her. No pretense, no entourage. Just a woman in jeans, holding a child's piano book. On the way home, they stopped at the market. Emily insisted on paying for groceries, much to Cal's grumbling. She filled the cart with fresh bread, real butter, and coffee beans that didn't come in a tin. I'm just upgrading your pantry, she said with a wink. Next, you'll be alphabetizing my spice rack. Don't tempt me. They spent the afternoon reorganizing the kitchen. Emily tossed out expired cans, wiped shelves, and labeled containers like it was therapy. Cal watched with amusement as she even found a place for Lily's growing collection of rubber band animals. By evening, something had shifted. Not with words, but in how they moved around one another. There were no second guesses now. No polite hesitation. Emily laughed easier. Cal reached for things she couldn't. They were becoming something like a family. That night, after Lily had gone to bed, they sat on the porch under a sky full of stars. Emily sipped hot cider from an old mug and watched Cal as he repaired a broken lantern. You're good with your hands, she said, voice light. Comes from years of fixing things nobody else will. She hesitated, then added, I used to think fixing things meant replacing them, buying new, throwing away the old. Cal looked up. And now? I think I was wrong. He said nothing, just nodded slowly. Emily looked up at the stars. There's this pressure when you're born into money, to be brilliant, impeccable, never messy, never wrong, and somewhere in all that pretending, I forgot how to just be. You're doing fine, she turned to him. You don't know what that means to me. He stood, stepped closer, and offered her his hand. Come on. She looked confused. Where? Out there. He pointed toward the backyard. Grass is dry, moon's up, perfect for slow dancing. So, slow dancing? You said you never got to do the normal things. She stared at him for a heartbeat, then set her mug down and placed her hand in his. Out there in the dark, with the fireflies blinking around them and the stars overhead like scattered prayers, Cal held her close. They didn't speak, didn't need to. Her head rested lightly against his chest, and he felt her exhale. Not a sigh, not relief. Something deeper, a release. In that quiet moment, there were no billionaires, no garage mechanics, no pasts to outrun or futures to predict. Just 2 people, moving slowly, in rhythm with something neither of them could name, but both of them, finally, quietly, trusted. The wind changed on a Wednesday. It had been a still, bright morning, the kind that makes you believe nothing could go wrong. Cal was under the truck in the garage, the smell of oil and steel thick in the air. Lily was at school, and Emily was sitting on the steps with a notepad in her lap, sketching what she called the world that doesn't want anything from me. She had drawn the creek, the porch swing, and a lopsided chicken with suspicious eyes. Artistic liberties, she said when Cal teased her about it. But by late afternoon, clouds had gathered over the ridge. Not storm clouds, not yet, but darker than usual. Cal noticed it first in the shift in the birdsong, then in the stillness of the trees. Emily noticed it too. She stood by the window that evening, arms crossed, as Lily played quietly with building blocks on the rug. Something feels off, she said. Cal nodded. Weather's turning. But he wasn't sure that's what it was. The knock came just after dinner. Not the familiar rhythm of neighbors or delivery drivers. It was firm, measured, official. Cal opened the door to find a man in a charcoal gray suit and polished shoes that didn't belong on Wyoming soil. Behind him, a black SUV idled near the fence. The man held out a card. Richard Langford. I'm looking for my niece. Cal's jaw tensed. He didn't take the card. She's not here, he said flatly. Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. Come now, mister. Bennett, we both know that's not true. Emily appeared behind Cal, quiet but composed. Hello, Uncle. Richard's smile widened. There you are. I've been looking everywhere. Your board has questions, your investors are nervous, and frankly, your absence is causing waves. Emily stepped forward. They'll manage. I left the company in capable hands. You left the company in chaos, he said, voice still silk but with a steel thread beneath it. You can't just disappear because you feel overwhelmed. I can, and I did. Cal glanced between them, the tension thickening by the second. Richard tilted his head. You're making a mistake, Emily. He gestured toward the cabin, the dirt driveway, the life she'd stumbled into. This is not who you are. Emily crossed her arms. That's where you're wrong. This is exactly who I am. And maybe it's who I've always been. Something in Richard's expression shifted. He took a step closer. Listen to me, he said lower now. You're vulnerable out here. No protection, no filters. If anything happened, like someone sending people to follow me in the woods? Emily cut in. Silence. Richard straightened. You're emotional. You've always been impulsive, and it's never served you well. Cal stepped forward, now fully between them. I think it's time you left. Richard looked at him, really looked, like a man trying to place a name to a threat he hadn't expected. You think this is going to end well, he said? This little fantasy? Cal didn't flinch. She's not a fantasy. She's a person, and you don't get to talk to her like she's your asset. Richard's smile finally cracked. It wasn't anger. It was calculation. I'll be in touch, he said, but don't wait too long to come back to the real world, Emily. You can't hide forever. With that, he turned and walked back to the SUV, disappearing into the darkening trees like a wolf in a suit. That night, Emily didn't say much. She sat on the porch after Lily had gone to bed, legs curled under her, staring at the stars that now felt a little farther away. Cal brought her a cup of tea and sat beside her. I'm sorry, she said after a long pause. For what? For dragging all this here. For thinking I could outrun it. You didn't drag anything. It found you. She looked down at her hands. He's right about one thing. I did leave a mess. People depending on me. A company in flux. And me, out here pretending like the world can wait. You weren't pretending, Cal said. You were healing. I don't know if I can do both. He leaned back against the railing. Maybe you're not supposed to do it alone. She turned to him, eyes soft but uncertain. You think I can fix this? I think you're stronger than you believe. She smiled faintly. You always say the right thing. I don't try to. I just say what's true. She looked at him for a long time. I'm scared. Good, he said. It means you're not numb anymore. She reached for his hand and he let her take it. There were no promises, no declarations. But in the face of everything that tried to pull them apart, they stayed still. And sometimes stillness is the bravest act of all. The storm rolled in before dawn. Not a thunderstorm, not the kind that howls and cracks the sky in half, but a quiet, steady downpour that soaked the earth like sorrow settling into the bones. Cal stood by the kitchen window, a mug cooling in his hands, watching the mist blur the trees. Behind him, the cabin was too quiet. Even Lily, usually the first to bounce down the stairs in mismatched socks, stayed in bed. Maybe she sensed it too. The shift. The ache that lingers in the walls before something breaks. Emily hadn't slept much. Cal had heard her pacing in the loft, soft footfalls above his head like a clock ticking louder with every hour. He didn't blame her. He couldn't sleep either. By mid-morning, she came down the stairs. She wore the same blue sweater from the day before, her braid a little looser, her eyes ringed with fatigue but clear. Heartbreakingly clear. Can we talk? She asked. Cal nodded, setting the mug aside. Of course. They sat at the table across from each other like strangers at a crossroads. I have to go back, she said. He didn't flinch, didn't blink. He'd known it, felt it coming like the change in the wind. When? He asked. Today, she replied. Richard left a message. He's called an emergency board meeting. If I'm not there, he'll move to have me removed permanently. Cal nodded slowly. And you believe he'll succeed? Yes. She paused. He's been building a case behind my back. The longer I stay here, the more control I lose. Not just of the company, of the work we're doing, the grants, the farms, the clean water initiatives. It's more than a business. You built it. I inherited it, she corrected. But I finally started shaping it into something good. I can't let that be erased. Cal didn't argue. He wouldn't be the man to ask her to stay if staying meant losing everything she'd worked for. Instead, he said, Lily will be disappointed. Emily smiled, eyes glassy. I'll write her a letter, maybe draw her another chicken. They both laughed, quietly, gently, like people who didn't know what else to do. An hour later, the SUV arrived. This one was different. Silver, modest, driven by a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and no clipboard. Emily hugged Lily tightly at the door, whispering something into her ear that made the little girl clutch harder. Will you come back? Lily asked, her voice small. Emily crouched to her level. I hope so, sweetheart. I really, really hope so. Then she stood and turned to Cal. He stepped forward, and she fell into his arms without hesitation. Neither spoke for a long moment. When she finally pulled back, her hand lingered on his chest. You saved me, Cal, and not just in the woods. He shook his head. You did most of the saving yourself. Still, she whispered, I needed you to see me, and you did. He held her gaze. I won't say goodbye. Not yet. She smiled, bittersweet and brave. Then let's call it, see you soon. And then she was gone. That night, the house felt larger. Cal made dinner, though he barely touched it. Lily picked at her food, quiet and tired in a way no child should be. Afterward, they sat on the couch, the TV flickering with old cartoons neither of them paid much attention to. She'll come back, Cal said softly. Lily looked up at him. You think so? I do. But what if she can't? Cal looked down at his daughter, her eyes full of the kind of worry kids shouldn't have to carry. He wrapped his arm around her shoulders and pulled her close. Then we remember what she gave us while she was here, and we trust that love, the real kind, doesn't disappear. It just waits. Lily nodded, her head against his chest. They sat that way until she fell asleep. Later, after carrying Lily to bed, Cal stepped out onto the porch. The rain had stopped, but the air still hung heavy, thick with the scent of wet pine and something more elusive, the ghost of something beautiful just out of reach. He looked up at the stars. Some were dim, some were brilliant, but all of them were still there. The days blurred. Cal returned to his routine, garage repairs, school pickups, evening walks with Lily. But everything moved a little slower, not because he was lost, but because something was missing. Or rather, someone. The cabin held her absence like a breath held too long. Her coffee mug sat untouched on the counter. The piano book she bought for Lily leaned in the corner like forgotten letters. And the note she left, a short, handwritten message tucked beneath Lily's pillow, had become a bedtime tradition. Lily asked Cal to read it every night before sleep. Dear Lily, thank you for teaching me how to play. I'll never forget your sparkle. Love, Miss Emily. Some nights Cal read it twice. He never said he missed her. He didn't have to. It was in the way he'd pause before making 2 cups of coffee, then pour just one. In the way he lingered at the porch railing, watching the road curve out of view. In the way his eyes softened when Lily asked, Do you think she's okay? He always answered the same. I think she's trying to be. One Saturday morning, while fixing a radiator leak on an old Chevy, Cal heard the crunch of tires on gravel. A rusted pickup pulled into the lot. A man stepped out, tall, wiry, with a week-old beard and tired eyes. He wore a coat patched at the elbows and boots that had seen better days. Morning, he said, nodding toward Cal. You Cal Bennett? Depends who's asking. The man offered a card. Local press, Jackson Hole Sentinel. I heard a story, he said, about a woman found near death, bitten by a snake. Said a mechanic saved her life and didn't know she was worth more than the county bank. Cal stiffened. You heard wrong. The reporter smiled. She's back on the front page, you know. Langford Industries. Takeover blocked. Chairwoman reinstated. Whole soap opera. I'm not interested in soap operas. I'm interested in truth. Cal straightened. Truth is, I helped a woman because she needed help. I didn't ask for her name, and I don't need to tell you mine. The man blinked, then nodded. Fair enough. He walked back to his truck, but before climbing in, he looked over his shoulder. She mentioned you, you know, not by name, but she said she met someone who reminded her why people matter more than numbers. Just thought you should know. Then he drove off. That night, Cal sat on the porch long after Lily had gone to bed. He nursed a cup of black coffee and stared out at the pine trees, dark and whispering in the wind. Emily was fighting, not just for her company, for herself, and part of him ached to be there, not to fix things, but to stand beside her. But he also knew this was her mountain to climb. He just hoped she remembered the way back down. Sunday came with a quiet knock at the door. Cal opened it to find Mrs. Henderson holding a small package. "This came for you," she said, eyes curious. "No return address, just your name, and a very expensive-looking envelope." Cal took it, thanked her, and waited until she was out of sight before opening it. Inside, a letter and a photograph. The letter was simple, written in Emily's hand. "Dear Cal, I'm still breathing, still fighting." The board backed off. "For now, Richard's gone quiet, which worries me more than when he's loud. But I wanted you to have this. It's not a goodbye. Just something to remind you that I'm still carrying a piece of that porch swing with me. Tell Lily her sparkle is safe." Emily, the photo was of the three of them, taken on the tire swing, probably by one of the neighbors without Cal noticing. Lily grinning, Cal mid-laugh. Emily with her hair blown sideways and joy on her face. He hadn't known someone had caught it, and now he couldn't stop looking at it. That evening, Cal pinned the photo to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a tractor. Then he stood back and stared. Not because he missed her, though he did, but because for the first time in a long while, he believed in something again. Not just in love, but in return. Spring came early that year. It swept through the valley like a long-held breath, finally exhaled. Snowmelt trickled from the ridge, coaxing wildflowers from their winter slumber. Cal found himself working outside more, fixing fences, clearing gutters, replanting the garden that Emily had once admired with half a smile and a full heart. Lily, for her part, had become an expert in folding paper cranes. It started as a school project, something about wishes and Japanese folklore, but she had taken to it like a duck to water. Every evening she folded one more, each with a different colored wing, and lined them up along the windowsill like a tiny army of hope. "What are they for?" Cal asked one night as she finished her sixth. She didn't look up from her fold. "Wishes. For what?" "For her to come back." He didn't have the heart to tell her that life didn't work like that, that sometimes people leave even if they want to stay, that goodbyes happen even when no one says the word. Instead, he said, "She'd love these." "I know," Lily said softly. A week later, something changed. The mail came late, as usual. Cal thumbed through the usual stack, bills, flyers, a catalog for tractor parts, when he saw the envelope. Cream-colored, heavy paper, handwritten in navy ink. To Cal and Lily Bennett, no return address. He opened it at the kitchen table, his hands steady but his heart nowhere near. Inside were 3 plane tickets, round trip, to New York City, and a letter. "Dear Cal, I meant to write sooner, but life, as you know, has a way of piling up when you're not looking. We've managed to hold things together here. The board's no longer circling, and the press has moved on. Mostly, but it all feels different now. Hollow, maybe, like I've stepped back into a life that doesn't quite fit anymore. There's an event in a few weeks. Nothing flashy, just a quiet gathering to thank the folks who helped me keep Langford's heart from being ripped out. I'd like you to come. Both of you. You don't owe me anything, but I'd love for you to see the other side of my world. Not the headlines, just the people. And maybe, me. If you come, there'll be someone waiting for you at the airport with a sign that says Ren. You'll understand when you see it." With hope, Emily Cal read it twice, then handed it to Lily without a word. She scanned it with wide eyes. "Is this real?" "I think it is. Can we go?" He looked out the window where the cranes lined up against the glass like a jury made of paper and dreams. "I think we should." The next few days passed in a flurry of planning. Cal had to ask for time off from the garage, find someone to feed the chickens, dust off the only sport coat he owned. Lily packed and repacked her backpack 4 times. I don't know what people wear in New York, she said seriously. Probably not cowboy boots with glitter, Cal replied. I'm wearing them anyway. Good call. The morning of the flight, the sun rose golden and clean. Cal loaded their bags into the truck, triple-checked the plane tickets, and made Lily promise not to lose her stuffed bunny in the airport. They drove to Jackson, then boarded a small regional flight that took them to Denver, and from there, a bigger plane into LaGuardia. Cal hadn't flown in years, not since his engineering days. The roar of the jet engines stirred something deep, a past life, shelved but not forgotten. Lily pressed her face to the window most of the way, pointing out clouds and rivers and what she claimed were castles. When they landed, a woman in a navy coat stood near the baggage claim, holding a sign that read, Wren, in tall letters. Lily squinted. What's that mean? It's a bird, Cal said. Tiny but loud. The woman smiled as they approached. Mr. Bennett? Miss Lily? That's us. Miss Langford asked me to bring you straight to the house. She's been counting the hours. Lily beamed. Cal tried to pretend his heart wasn't racing. They rode through the city in a black SUV, Cal watching the skyline rise like something out of a memory. Lily gawked at the billboards, the taxis, the sheer scale of it all. Do you think she lives in one of those buildings? She asked. I don't know, Cal said, but I'm guessing we're not headed to a cabin. When they turned onto a quiet street lined with cherry blossoms, Cal felt the breath catch in his throat. At the end of the drive stood a townhouse, elegant but unassuming, ivy creeping up the side, windows glowing warmly in the dusk. The SUV stopped. The driver stepped out, opened the door. Lily jumped down, clutching her stuffed bunny, and Cal followed, slower. The front door opened before they could knock, and there she was, Emily. In jeans and a soft sweater, barefoot, hair loose around her shoulders, her eyes bright and full of something that made Cal feel like the earth had tilted just slightly toward right again. Hey, she said, smiling. Hey, he answered. Lily didn't hesitate. She ran forward and wrapped her arms around Emily's waist. Emily laughed, then looked up. At Cal. I hoped you'd come. I think I always was, he said. The next morning, the city woke before the sun. Cal hadn't slept much. The townhouse guest room was comfortable, even elegant, but everything felt just slightly out of place. The soft sheets, the tall ceilings, the faint hum of the city that never really fell silent. He sat by the window with a cup of dark roast Emily had made herself, staring at the skyline. It was beautiful in a way he had forgotten. Sharp, fast, alive. But his thoughts kept drifting backward, to pine trees and pancake mornings. To home. Emily knocked gently on the door just after sunrise. Dress nice, she said with a soft smile. Not suit and tie. Just today matters. Cal nodded. He didn't ask questions. By mid-morning, they were in the back seat of a quiet sedan, Lily between them, pointing out statues and food carts with the wonder only a child can carry into a place like Manhattan. You nervous? Cal asked Emily as they pulled up to the curb. Terrified, she said, but I've got backup. The building was tall, but not a skyscraper. Langford Holdings headquarters didn't tower over the skyline. It blended into it, tastefully understated, like someone who knew they didn't have to shout to be heard. The lobby was a vast stretch of marble and glass, sunlight pouring through the high windows. But it wasn't cold. It was filled with plants. Real ones. Not just for decoration, but for air, for presence. And along one wall, there was a mural in soft watercolor tones. It was a painting of soil. Emily caught Cal looking at it. My grandfather believed business should grow things, she said. Not just profits. We kept that part. She led them past polished elevators and curious glances. Cal noticed that no one stared too long. They all recognized her. But more than that, they respected her. Not one bowed or gushed. They nodded and moved on. That said more than any press release ever could. The event was small, as promised. Not a gala, a gathering. 50 or 60 people stood in a glass-walled atrium on the top floor, mingling with coffee and soft music playing on a piano somewhere in the corner. There were engineers, farmers, philanthropists, a woman in a grease-stained jumpsuit who looked more at home under a tractor than at a podium. Emily walked among them like she was returning to a garden she'd planted but hadn't seen bloom. She introduced Cal and Lily to everyone, not as guests but as family. "This is Cal," she said again and again. "He reminded me why this work matters." Each time, Cal felt both humbled and strangely at peace. It wasn't flattery. It wasn't show. It was gratitude. Later, when most of the crowd had filtered out, Emily stood at the center of the atrium. Sunlight spilled through the windows, casting soft halos around her. "I want to show you something," she said to Cal and Lily. She led them into a side hallway, down a quiet corridor, and into a private room. It looked more like a library than an office. Walls of books, framed photographs, a small upright piano in the corner. On the far wall hung 3 photographs, mounted side by side in simple wood frames. Cal stepped closer. The first was a field, bare, sun-baked, cracking under drought. The second was the same land, green and alive, rows of crops bending in the wind. The third was a photo of the porch of his cabin, where Lily and Emily had once roasted marshmallows under a blanket of stars. "You hung that?" he asked, voice low. Emily nodded. "I wanted to remember what it felt like to breathe again." She stepped closer, her voice softening. "I've spent most of my life trying to prove I belonged in boardrooms and balance sheets, but none of that ever made me feel seen. Not really. Not until you." Cal turned to face her, and for the first time, he saw her not as the girl he saved or the woman he'd come to love, but as both. As someone who had carried a weight he couldn't imagine, and still found the courage to kneel beside a tire swing and love a child that wasn't hers. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, simple object. A key. "I bought a place," she said. "Not in New York, not in LA, just outside Jackson, near the ridge." Cal stared at it. "It's not a mansion," she added quickly. "Just a house, with enough space for chickens, and maybe a tire swing, if you still want one." He said nothing, just looked at her. At the key. At the woman who had found her way back. Not because he asked, but because she chose to. And sometimes love doesn't need grand gestures. Sometimes it just needs a door left open. The sky above Wyoming opened wide, blue and unbothered, as the truck crested the final ridge. Emily rolled the window halfway down, letting the mountain air sweep into her lungs. It smelled like pine and open earth, like something she'd once forgotten, but had never stopped needing. Lily, in the back seat, clutched her stuffed bunny and hummed a tune she'd picked up somewhere between New York and home. She had drawn a new picture on the flight. 3 stick figures again, but this time beneath a roof with smoke curling from the chimney. One word scrawled at the top. "Us." Cal glanced over at Emily. "Still sure about this?" She smiled, one hand resting on the key in her lap. Never been more. The house wasn't anything grand. A simple A-frame tucked against a stand of pines just off the same gravel road that once led Emily out of danger and into something bigger than safety. The lawn was uneven, the paint a little faded, but the porch swing creaked in the breeze, and the front steps welcomed them like old friends. Emily stepped out of the truck and stood in the yard, taking it in. "I still don't know how to plant tomatoes," she said. "We'll learn together," Cal replied. Inside, the air smelled of fresh wood and soap. Emily had hired locals to furnish it simply. A kitchen table built by hand, bookshelves made of reclaimed barn boards, and a fireplace already stacked with wood. On the mantel, a photo had been framed, the 3 of them on the tire swing. It felt less like decoration and more like intention. They spent the afternoon unpacking. Cal fixed the hinge on a kitchen cabinet. Emily folded blankets. Lily arranged her paper cranes along the windowsill, this time in the order of a rainbow. At sunset, they sat on the porch. Lily curled up on the swing between them, wrapped in a quilt. Emily rested her head on Cal's shoulder. "I used to think love was supposed to be loud," she said. "Big, like fireworks or movie endings." He looked out at the horizon where the sun tucked behind the hills. "Turns out it's quieter. It's steady. It's enough," he said. She nodded. "More than enough." A week passed. Then 2. The rhythm they fell into was as gentle as the wind through the pines. Cal worked at the garage in town 3 days a week. Emily started a consulting project that let her work remotely, using her name not to build towers, but to open doors for others. Lily started school and made fast friends. Kids who didn't care who Emily Langford was, only that she baked good cookies and knew how to braid hair. On the first weekend of fall, they threw a cookout. Neighbors came, the Hendersons, a retired vet from the valley, a mother and son with a goat named Elvis. They brought pies and folding chairs and stories. Emily laughed until her sides ached. She forgot to check her phone all day. Later that night, after the dishes were washed and the last firefly blinked away, Cal took her hand. "You built a life," he said. She squeezed back. "No, we did." Winter came slowly that year. Snow dusted the ground like sugar. The mornings grew quiet and soft. On Christmas Eve, they stayed in. No glitter, no grand plans. Just cocoa and music and a fire. Lily insisted they each hang one wish on the tree. Cal's was simple. Let it last. Emily's was folded small. Let them always know I chose them. And Lily's, written in crayon and glitter pen, said, "No more leaving." They sat together, arms linked, the firelight painting them gold. No one said it out loud, but they all knew this was home. Sometime after midnight, Cal stepped out onto the porch alone. The stars were clear and endless. The porch light glowed behind him, casting long shadows across the snow. Emily came out a minute later, her coat wrapped tight. She slipped her arm through his. "Still afraid I'll disappear?" she asked. He looked at her, eyes soft. "Not anymore." They stood in the silence, in the cold that no longer felt empty. And in that moment, with her head on his shoulder and her hand in his, Cal understood something that had taken him years to learn. Love doesn't always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it finds you on a forest path. Sometimes it stays in a flannel shirt in a quiet kitchen. And sometimes it walks back through your door because you left the porch light on. If you've made it this far, thank you, truly, for spending your time with this story. We'd love to know, where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. We're always amazed to see how far these stories travel and how they connect hearts across the world. If this story touched you, inspired you, or simply gave you a moment of peace today, consider subscribing to the channel. It's completely free, and it helps us bring you more heartfelt tales about love, kindness, and the miracles hidden in everyday life. From our little corner of the world to yours, thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.